Hello and welcome. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Now, in the next half hour, we'll see what's making headlines with the barrister and futurist Andrew Eborn and the journalist and author Christina Patterson. So let's take a look at what is on some of the front pages, and we'll start with The Observer, which has seen leaked documents, which it says shows the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove is to announce plans this week to ban individuals and groups from public life who the government deemed to be extremists. The Telegraph has spoken to Mr Gove, who's told pro-Palestinian protesters that they risk rubbing shoulders with extremists if they join marches against the conflict in Gaza. The Times says that the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson flew to Venezuela last month to try to discourage the country's leader Nicolás Maduro from sending military supplies to Russia. The Sunday Express headline, Labour are cowards over boats crisis, the words of the Home Secretary in an interview with the paper. The Mirror reports that the mother of the murdered trans teenager Brianna Ghey has launched a campaign in schools aimed at having lessons in kindness and mindfulness made part of the curriculum. The People looks at the killing of baby Pete in 2007 and news that his stepfather may soon be granted parole. And The Sun has news of the new love in the life of Downton Abbey star Hugh Bonneville. And finally, The Star has a story about smelly socks. And a reminder, by scanning the QR code you see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of the papers while you watch along with us. Well, tonight we're joined by the barrister and futurist Andrew Eborn and the journalist and author Christina Patterson. Andrew, Christina,
good to see you.
Thanks to both. Lovely to see you in person for the first time. Yeah. Lovely to see you. All right, let's crack straight on. Thanks for giving up your Saturday nights for us. We'll start with The Observer. And talk us through this reporting, if you can, then, Christina. This is Michael Gove, who's going to release the details of this new definition of extremism. Yes,
well, this government is very keen on banning things, and Michael Gove apparently wants to redefine extremism. We don't know the fine detail yet, and I imagine that it relates, excuse me, quite a lot to what has happened following the events of 7th of October and what has happened on some of these marches, and certainly what has happened on some of these marches. Some of it has been rather alarming. I think, for example, projecting the slogan "From the river to the sea" on the Houses of Parliament, which for many Jews and Israelis would be deemed to be essentially seeking the obliteration of Israel, was certainly provocative. Mm-hmm. It apparently didn't cross a legal line, but it was certainly provocative. But I think the government, you know, what this always raises is what is the definition of an extremist? Everybody thinks that they are sensible. Everybody thinks that everybody else is an extremist. And frankly, I think some of the things we've seen in the last few years, particularly during Boris Johnson's government and Liz Truss's, has definitely not been exactly the voice of common sense. So I do think this is a little bit alarming, actually. Okay.
Andrew, let's talk a little bit about this as well, but the Telegraph have got it on the front page as well. They've also got an interview with Michael Gove. What did you make of the reporting? I mean, the Telegraph headline says, "Don't march alongside extremists." I think, as we understand it, they're going to, and I won't use the word prescribe because, of course, that's not what they're going to do to these groups. Yes. They're going to set out certain groups and individuals within groups that will not get access to sort of government talks, etc.
No, absolutely. Well, the difficulty is this. It's a balance act between freedom of speech and freedom from consequences. And the reality is, as they say, it's all about definition. Mm-hmm. And it's the same around the world. We have in Canada, we've got the Online Harms Bill, or Online Harms Act as it now is over there, where they're basically sort of turning around what constitutes something which is extreme. And they've started to say, look, something which has undermined the UK system of liberal democracy. Well, the trouble is that's so all-encompassing. If you've got a view which is contrary to your own, does that mean you shut it down? So it's a really, really fine balancing act. But what we need to do is avoid these horrendous scenes that we have seen, where you're basically inciting people to contradict and to shut certain things down. And certainly the stuff that we've seen on the street, the poison that we had online has spilled out onto the streets. And we need to cut that out to the extent.
But how do they go about doing it without making it statutory? We're not going to change the definitions of extremism, as I understand it. This is not going to be a new law that's going to come out.
Yeah, I think, generally speaking, I mean, Britain has prided itself on being the voice of tolerance and free speech. And personally, I think it should tread very, very cautiously. And I think it's better. We all have the right to be offended and we all have the right to offend. What we don't have the right to do is to cross the legal line in terms of hate speech. And I'm not convinced that there is a need to change the law on that front. And obviously passions are running incredibly high because of the absolutely horrific events that are happening in Gaza. And anyone who can watch the news and not feel incredibly upset, whatever, whether they are on one side or the other, any human being would be devastated to see all that. But I think that is not a reason for a government minister to think, OK, let's change the definitions. I did, some years ago, I did a big investigation into the Prevent programme for the Sunday Times. And, things have changed a bit since then, and there's been a lot of criticism of the programme. And clearly, extremism is something that should be tackled, both on whether it applies to extreme Islamism or the far right or wherever. But legally, in terms of changing definitions, I think you have to tread very, very carefully.
There's also, we have laws in place. I mean, the Terrorism Act is there to prevent supporting terrorist groups and prescribe terrorist groups. They're very clear things. It's about enforcement. And this is the problem. Trust comes in on foot and leaves on horseback. And a lot of people at the moment are saying, look, these laws are not being enforced. And the difficulty, as I say, the difficulty in bringing in a new definition is you say, we don't need to change the laws. What we need to do is to enforce the laws we've currently got.
Really good discussion on that, guys. Let's move on to the front of the Sunday Times. And this is a story that... when it dropped, I think I got a notification on my phone. My mouth dropped open again.
Too,
and the details of it are just fantastic. Talk us through this. Who wants to start?
Boris Johnson, surprisingly, was on holiday in the Caribbean. Who would have thought it? I mean, obviously, one would have thought more a wet weekend in Wales kind of man. But there he was, and also staying, interestingly, at the villa of his distant cousin, the one who Sam, whose surname I've now forgotten.
Sam Blythe.
Yes, that's right. Who managed to essentially force the BBC chairman out because it was the BBC chairman, the former BBC chairman Richard Sharp, trying to introduce him to possibly get help, support poor Boris Johnson, because as Prime Minister obviously paid the pittance that a Prime Minister gets paid, couldn't possibly afford normal household expenses. Cost of living crisis apparently hit him very hard with his gold wallpaper, etc., and that led to the departure of Richard Sharp. But he's basically freelancing as a kind of rogue foreign secretary. Yes. So he's gone off to meet the dictator of Venezuela, in essence, populist leader, the new populist leader, Maduro, of Venezuela. We don't know what he said. We apparently know that he texted David Cameron on the way to say, "Oh, hi, mate, I'm on my way to see this populist dictator of Venezuela."
Yeah. We don't have diplomatic relations with Venezuela.
We don't have diplomatic
relations. What I like, which encapsulated it, is Newman's View, the brilliant cartoon on the front of the Sunday Times, which has a gold statue of Boris, just in reference to the Oscars, saying "Best Acting Foreign Secretary," which I thought was glorious.
Yes.
It's got to be good.
It does seem as if they did know what was happening. Right?
Yes.
The Foreign Secretary knew what was happening. I mean, Lord Cameron...
These things
whether
don't
he signs it
happen
off
by
or not.
accident.
Exactly. Whether he signed it off or not, he knew that it was taking place, which...
Political manoeuvres. I mean, Boris he went from the sort of the Carlsberg politician who reached parts of the electorate that nobody else could, to the Marmite, and he will revisit, I'm sure, this particular things. But no, these things don't happen by accident. They know what was going on, and the fact that he's made the front page of the Sunday Times is no accident.
And I guess the sort of the essence of it and the importance of it is quite key as well. He apparently, according to reporting, he's there to try and encourage Venezuela to join our side of the war against the Russians. And this is not, this is Boris Johnson in this, but Lord Cameron's been in the region as well, trying to sort of shore up other support within the region after he did the G20.
As you and anyone knows, but I think you may remember, Kamali, I'm no fan of Boris Johnson. However, on this particular occasion, I will cut him a degree of slack, because I believe that the one cause that he is totally passionate about is Ukraine, and he was there supporting President Zelensky from the beginning.
Yes.
And I think this really is the thing that he would put himself out of, probably partly because he thinks he's Churchill and wants to be Churchill, but who cares what delusions he's got? The fact is that Ukraine has to win this war, and if this helps, fine.
And the thing is, as well, it seems as if the reception he gets in these places are far better than the reception that we get.
They love him on the international stage. He's a superstar. So from an ego point of view, not that I suggest he's got an ego, but it's a wonderful welcome. So you can understand why he does it. You can understand if some good comes out of it, then that's got to be worthwhile.
Yeah, I suppose the question is just how much Rishi Sunak may have known about it. OK, a quick thought, if we can, about the front of the Express. Of course, we are still awaiting the decision on that Rwanda plan, but the Home Secretary has spoken to the Express, describing the Labour Party as cowards. And, of course, the refrain we always hear is the Labour don't have a plan.
Yes.
I guess this is part of that.
Well, it's the typical narrative, and they repeat it yet again this week, or with Rishi sort of saying that, and they've got no plan, and so on and so forth. Rwanda's been there. It's been a nasty word, if you like, for the Tories. People are sort of teasing them that you're not going to get one single person being processed. But the reality is something has to be done. And it was the 5-point plan. You remember Rishi standing there saying, well, inflation will be halved. Well, that was the easy one, because it was at 11%. So we've done that already. But the boats have been there to bite them all along. And so they need to have something. And the whole idea about Rwanda was that was going to be some sort of solution. And we haven't heard it from Labour.
Christina, I mean, are they cowards over the boat crisis? Is that how you would
No, I don't think they are
phrase
cowards.
it?
I think they do have. I mean, it's a very, very complicated problem because, understandably, people from war-torn regions and people from extremely poor countries want to come and live here, and no one can blame them for that. The trouble is that they come here aided by people smugglers, and it's not a fair system. I think the trouble is they've thrown millions, I mean, more than 100 million of taxpayers' money at something, and so far not a single person has gone to live in these marvellous houses that Suella Braverman thinks are so completely delightful. And declaring a country safe when internationally it is not regarded as safe, and when judges have deemed that it isn't safe, may be very good fun, but it is like saying, you know, black is white, the sky is blue when it's grey, or whatever. Yeah. It is not reality, and you can't just declare things to be true when they're not.
Unfortunately, we can't get into that constitutional trial because it is a fascinating...
It is Abraham Lincoln, I always quote, absolutely.
Right, Andrew, Christina, thanks both for that for now. Now, on the eve of the Oscars, we'll tell you what the star, Margot Robbie, says to the Sunday Express about London and its influence on her work. Stay with us. Hello and welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With us is the barrister and futurist Andrew Eborn and the journalist and author Christina Patterson. Guys, thanks for staying with us. Let's just look at the next couple of papers. We'll start with the front of the Sunday Mirror. And this is a story about the mother of Brianna Ghey, Esther Ghey, who is wonderfully going into schools to try and make children kinder after what happened to her daughter.
It must be. Tomorrow is Mother's Day, and what a day to announce this on the front page. And to her credit, she's saying exactly they want to introduce these mindfulness lessons as part of the school curriculum so we get greater understanding about these sort of issues. It was a horrendous case, and it's quite right if some good can come out of it.
Absolutely. And the thing that came out of that case was the way that these children had spent time on the internet and kind of got themselves into these awful echo chambers and perhaps not engaging with people properly. So if there can be some sense that we get a bit of humanity back in the classroom.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I mean, the news is so relentlessly grim, but Esther Ghey must be one of the most extraordinary people most of us will ever hear about. The depth of humanity she has shown towards the parents of her daughter's killers, and knowing, well, not knowing, but having been through the absolute agony of losing Brianna, to have some sense of what they must be going through as well, and to want to spread this campaign of empathy and kindness in schools. I think she is absolutely phenomenal. I really do.
And and a wonderful legacy that she's going to leave for her daughter. Wish her all the best with that. All right, it is Oscars tomorrow, so let's move on to a story. I think it's in the Sunday Express.
It is.
And this is she's Margot Robbie talking about a London film club that you said...
Isn't that lovely? Well, I know the place. I mean, it's a glorious place. Yeah. Notting Hill Electric Cinema is where it is. And it is a very posh place with wonderful armchairs and things like that. And what they used to do with the cast is bring them all together to watch certain iconic films. So, for example, they saw the His Girl Friday because Greta Gerwig, director of Barbie, wanted all the Barbies at the dance party to have that rhythm when they speak. They also watched The Red Shoes because it was really poppy and saturated in 1950s. So the whole idea of the cast getting together, watching these iconic films made a lot of sense. Space Odyssey, because there was references to that as well.
Yeah.
But what I love about it, you get the cast together, it shows on screen. It's not going to win the prize, even though it's a multi-billion dollars raised at the box office. But it was a fabulous pinkness, if you like that sort of thing. And it's good and a nice little insight into how the cast get together and create that chemistry.
It is, and it's nice when you hear that a cast can get on and be together. I guess
It sounded like such fun. And Barbie was the first film I saw in a cinema after the pandemic, and I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was a truly brilliant film. I think it's pretty disgraceful that Margot Robbie wasn't nominated for her acting. Actually, she has been nominated as a producer, I think. But I mean, I think acting is such an extraordinary craft. I think I've interviewed masses of actors, and the art that goes into that and the discipline, it is an incredible multi-layered skill. And to see that part of what they did was to be really noting the timing, for example, in His Girl Friday. I mean, you can see it in the result, but it's just a lovely story.
It's lovely. It's glorious.
I'd love to spend my Sunday mornings in the Notting Hill Electric Cinema.
With Margot Robbie and then watching movies.
Exactly, yes.